Hello, welcome back, listeners. This is Silicon Valley Impact on Tal Radio. I'm Roger Royce, your host, and each week we talk to different individuals who are doing things that have a social impact on the local community here in Silicon Valley and beyond. And today we have Amy Seidman. She's the founder and CEO of Noble Profit. Amy, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the Silicon Valley Impact show.
Okay, thank you. So tell me a little bit about Noble Profit. What is that and what is it doing?
Noble Profit is a public benefit corporation that was formed to inspire people around what we can do with business, investment, and across all aspects of our world to help transform the world and solve these great challenges. So we inspire with media, we educate with data, and we take action with technology.
So I understand you have a technology that you've developed called BFlow. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what it does?
Absolutely. So in the big vision and the future, we are designing for creating an open shared intelligence ecosystem, and eventually we'll open source the technology. Today, it's a tool for transparency that answers a lot of the regulatory requirements that are happening globally to create more disclosure around what are called ESG metrics, environmental social governance. And we're focusing on sustainable development goals as the anchor point. And the purpose of it is to help create more visibility, more shared information. So if you have groups of wealth managers using it to report their transparency requirements, they can also be within this shared intelligence ecosystem and gain from learning from one another and comparing themselves and seeing, where the landscape is and the opportunities are. At its greatest purpose and vision, it's how can we create more visibility and understanding of where these flows of resources are going.
So who would use this tool? Just tell me a little more about it, who it's useful for.
Sure. So wealth managers that need to comply with the
the ESG stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So anyone who is reporting, so users of the systems can be finance, people in finance, corporate, governments, nonprofits, philanthropists. So any entity that needs to comply with this kind of reporting, but also wants to give more depth and information around what they're doing.
I see. And is it a free tool or is it something you license?
Well, right now we're in a lab and we're having partners come in and work with us to develop that. We have an aspect to it that we are designing that would be used by folks who wouldn't be able to afford it, but we are creating a model that does involve, I guess, user licensing. It's a very different model because it's a blockchain technology, and blockchain technology really runs on gas. So, how are transactions processed within the system? The intention is that anybody who uses it will, become a partner in the system. But it's more complex, I think, than the standard SaaS model that most people understand.
Yeah, well, you're certainly in the right place at the right time, using the latest technology such as blockchain. And we know on our show, we've talked to other folks who are doing ESG, and we understand just how important that is and how powerful that is for everybody, especially here in the United States. I'm just looking at your website now. You've got a pretty impressive group of people involved in what you're doing here, it seems like. How did you manage to get to put this together and bring this, it's a public benefit corporation, you said, bring this organization together and gather all these great minds to work on this issue?
Thank you for recognizing that. So Noble Profit was actually started in 2013 based upon an idea. My background has been in media and technology and designing and developing tools for Web 1.0. And so I've always been involved since then on different, I guess what you would call cutting edge technology, and oftentimes a little bit early. And I had started a brand called Incredible Places and had been working with the national parks on creating interpretive media and using technology to further connecting humanity to nature. But I was hitting such a small number. And I had gone to get funded for a game and had gone to the Stanford Technology Summit and learned about clean tech and impact. And I was just like, wow, this is an area that I need to be really promoting, knowing that, one conversation can affect hundreds of thousands of dollars. So over time, we wanted to build a marketplace. After all the interviews, I shot 220 interviews around clean tech impact and sustainable business that informed the work that we're doing. And the intention was, how do we dispel the myth that sustainability costs more? It's actually really big business. Some people think about sustainability and they're like, oh, corporate CSR, and they're not realizing that this is fundamentally.
I'm sorry, what's CSR mean?
Corporate sustainability and responsibility.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm using the acronym correctly. Corporate sustainable responsibility. So it's a division within many companies where they run their philanthropy and their projects. And sustainability is so much more than that. And it's actually fundamentally part of the it's on the table at every board room across the country and across the world.
It has to be now. The SEC is, will soon be probably they're encouraging companies to weigh in their disclosure documents as to, what companies are doing in that regard and how ESG affects their companies.
And and that's exactly what this tool BFlow is designed to help facilitate.
Awesome. Okay. Well, now I totally get it. It sounds like it's a very valuable tool that Noble Profit is creating. This is Roger Royce with Silicon Valley Impact. We're talking to Amy, from the founder and CEO, Amy Seidman, founder and CEO of Noble Profit, and she's just telling us about their BFlow technology. We're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back with Silicon Valley Impact. Okay, welcome back. Roger Royce with Silicon Valley Impact on Tal Radio. We're talking with Amy Seidman, the founder and CEO of Noble Profit. She was just telling us before the break about the BFlow technology, which enables transparent reporting of ESG, something that certainly is in demand right now and that Noble Profit is developing. But Amy, it sounds like you do a lot of other things too. And you mentioned before the break that you're involved with a nonprofit, a foundation, in fact. Can you tell me about some of your nonprofit activities that Noble Profit and you are involved in?
Absolutely. I mean, when we start to look at the work that we're doing, many of the things that we're doing touch solving problems within community or with people who can't afford to use the technology. So from the point of BFlow technology, we have been running quite a few pilots. We did a whole series on COVID giving, where are resource flows from COVID coming and going. The other thing that we have focused on are projects with groups like Bay Area Green Tours, which look at food waste, local food waste. When you were talking about local projects and impact, they're a wonderful group that, one of the projects that they did was with LinkedIn, taking them on food waste tours, and then LinkedIn actually buys their food from these local providers. So you're creating a closed loop system where you're keeping, food that might not make it to the marketplace because it's not as pretty, and it's not going to go into the landfill. We have a tremendous amount of food waste just because maybe an apple isn't shaped perfectly, but you could be creating lots and lots of great food out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we pause on that one for a minute? Because that's an area that I've been very involved in. And in fact, my family was in the produce business. So I know that, there's at least 40% waste in produce from the time it gets packed and makes it to the table. And that's damage, that's spoilage. It's a tremendous amount. And of course, I work with a lot of companies that have technologies trying to deal with that, but there's only so much you can do with technology, right? You can use data and analytics and refrigeration, which our refrigeration is about 50 years old now. But so to do something like what you just described sounds very impactful. If you could get a big organization like LinkedIn with that big cafeteria of theirs, to actually help, I totally see how that would be a really good cause here in Silicon Valley.
And when we have 40% of food waste, that's a tremendous amount of carbon that's going back into the atmosphere, creating, methane when it goes to the place of rotting. And thankfully right now we're having a lot of composting that's happening in the city of San Francisco. So we're starting to deal with these things in different ways, but it is a tremendous amount of waste, and we can be creating dried food chips and snack packs for users. Now we're also focused. We have this media series, and the intention is to share this widely to change the perception of people that doing good things and as part of a company or within an investment it's really good business. And there's a lot of myths around sustainability costing more. There's a lot of polarity happening in our culture around these different topics. But if we can come from a different place and we can talk about how it serves us all, we can start to bridge that polarity. So these kinds of projects are sponsored. We have a fiscal sponsor with Win-Win Give. So we do this under our nonprofit. And many of the design of BFlow, we have a tool that we've been developing called Safeguard that folks can use to report forced labor, that can represent the little guy within the system. So whether it's illegal logging or forced labor or just really difficult situation with sexual harassment or something, that this is a tool that can be used. And we're also designing into the system ways that folks who maybe make only $1 a day would be able to be a part of the system. So these kinds of things, and the basis of our technology, BFlow, is going to be run, underneath this model. We haven't formed a foundation yet. So that's why we're fiscally sponsored with Win-Win Give, but we love this organization, and it's a great partnership for us.
Sounds like a Win-Win Give. What a name.
Yeah.
Kind of tells you right there what they're about, doesn't it?
Yep.
No, that's awesome. So this is Roger Royce with Silicon Valley Impact. We're talking now with Amy Seidman, the founder and CEO of Noble Profit, about some of the sustainability initiatives she's working on and the other charitable, philanthropic, and social impact programs she's involved in. We're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back with more from Amy Seidman. Okay, we are back. Roger Royce, Silicon Valley Impact on Tel Radio. We were talking to Amy Seidman, the founder and CEO of Noble Profit. Before the break, we were talking about some of the other initiatives that Amy is involved in. And I touched on something that we want to expand on a little bit here. It's really the regulatory environment, especially the SEC and what's going on, and that Securities and Exchange Commission, for those of you who might not live in this world like Amy and I do. But there a lot of what's going on in ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and social impact is being driven, by government and by policy. Don't you think so, Amy?
Well, actually, I think now it's starting to be. Prior to that, it was driven by divestment. So first pressure by brands, on brands by customers who wanted to not see, the brands using certain practices, as well as pressure from different nonprofit groups. And then it started to move into pressure from people divesting from investments within, dirty investments. And through that divestment movement, we have seen $50 trillion now under wealth management, which is pretty much half of the money in the world. And they're estimating that to be 80 trillion. So it's really enormous amounts of money. And from that, we have started to see regulatory pressure coming in, first in the EU with the Sustainable Financial Disclosure Regulation, which was formed in March, which is requiring companies and investors. I mean, that particular one is focused on investors, but there's other regulations that are pressuring companies to force them to give more depth of disclosure, because most ESG scores are based upon self-proclaimed information. And we can't break up those scores. We don't know how they come into the picture. And when you're looking at so much money, there's a massive money grab, lots of people kind of running after this money, and lots of greenwashing from companies. And
that's an interesting term, greenwashing. What does that mean?
Yeah. Greenwashing is basically when a company or an entity uses the story of doing good in the world, but maybe it's just a tiny fraction or an infinitesimally small percentage of what they're doing. And they're using that in their commercials and in, telling their story to make people feel better about their brand, when they're really doing heinous things behind, where they're just causing a lot of resource extraction, pollution, things like that. And so when you start to look at companies in these ESG footprints and with carbon credits, it's very hard to see a company that's using greenwashing or using carbon credits to cover up their bad behavior against a company that might be changing every aspect from how they create their products to how they treat their employees, where they are completely changing the game on how business is done. So having more depth behind these disclosures is really important for us all to really understand and to solve these problems, because we're chewing up the planet faster than the planet can restore itself. Now, with that, we're starting to see the Securities Exchange Commission here in the United States also start to adopt these kinds of regulatory stance. Right now, they have a committee and around oversight, and they have recommendations that they've formed to help guide. But there's, I guess, some word on the street that there may be, laws that are passed. I think, when we look at what's happening in the political landscape and the polarity, I think having that policy passed would be a really momentous thing to occur. But when we look at the money grab that's happening around this, 50 trillion, it starts to become something that does need to have a little bit more depth to it. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of pressure on companies to be more transparent and to kind of walk their talk and to create more understanding of how they've achieved that. And there's also a lot of misinformation that's out there that this can help with. There's a lot of NGOs that have great intentions, but they might be operating under old information, where they are targeting, an organization that has solved the problem within their organization, and then they're still being targeted. So it's really hard to understand what the truth is. And then when you have content marketing, and we know what's going on with fake news. Everybody's talking. Last year we had fake news. How do you know what you're looking at is really what's going on? So for all these reasons, we do need more and more of this transparency.
Yep, I totally get it. It makes perfect sense. It sounds like it's a tool that is needed. You're in the right place at the right time. And you mentioned earlier, you're using the latest, most up-to-date technology, blockchain. How has that gone for you?
Well, it's definitely a big lift. It's a new technology. It's constantly changing, and there's lots of challenges from educating people around it, people misunderstanding, thinking it's Bitcoin, not really understanding the application to these kinds of topics. And then there's on the topic of regulatory issues, there's a tremendous amount of gyration happening around regulations because it's an unregulated area. And so companies that like ours that are using it to create a tool are also having to deal with all of the cryptocurrency regulations that are trying to be enacted, and the scrutiny that makes things a lot harder. We've spent so much time where if we were just selling a software license, we wouldn't have to deal with anything. It's intellectual property law. And you being a lawyer, I'm sure can understand the difference between, regulations around money or regulations around securities versus, just selling your, something that you own.
Yeah, there's definitely
intellectual property.
There's definitely a need for clarity, and it's a developing area. And this is a place where, as usual, the technology moves faster than the law. And the law just can't keep up, and that's why we have all this uncertainty. And a lot of times that stifles innovation. Although, we have sort of a culture here in Silicon Valley, and you're sort of doing some of this too, where people will take a chance and they'll do big things. And just take a look at Uber. If they had tried to comply with, with all of these uncertain laws, and there never would have been an Uber. They had to do it for Uber, Lyft, all the ride share. Same with Airbnb. Same with a lot of different companies. So that's one of the challenges we have. But I'm glad to see that you're, going forward with it despite some of the uncertainty, and I hope the
It
regulatory.
was, yeah,
Mhm.
it was something I never knew and I expected before we got involved. It was one of those things that cost us a lot of time and a lot of
Yeah.
money, for legal oversight and advice. And I had a tremendous amount of learning. And when you talk about it stifling innovation, I have personally witnessed, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars going offshore because of the fact that there is no secure regulatory oversight. And then we have people who just don't understand it, trying to form laws that then will put people like myself in a position of doing something illegal by just putting our software out because they really don't understand the technology. So there is a woman at the SEC named Hector Pierce who put out a proposal this year about which, if adopted by the SEC, would give a 3-year kind of grace period for companies to make their token decentralized and to be able to activate their businesses and do the work without having to face huge fines or having their company shut down.
That would be awesome. We need more regulatory sandboxes. Arizona's got a regulatory sandbox for fintech. Utah's got one for legal tech. Wyoming, of course, has been just a real haven on a state level for innovation. They've got a law that allows decentralized autonomous organizations to operate as LLCs. So the states are moving a lot more quickly than the federal government, it seems, aren't they? And hopefully people will see the value in promoting what people like you are doing. Well, I want to thank you for being here. This is Roger Royce with Silicon Valley Impact. We've been talking with Amy Seidman at Noble Profit. They build the BFlow technology, which enables transparency in the ESG reporting system. Thank you again, Amy. This is really interesting. Good luck to you. I hope it's a huge success. And to those of you out and who are listening to us, thanks for being here, and we will see you next time.